Hi there. Thank you for joining me for the latest edition of Telile 24/7. I'm your host, Adam Cook, and we have all kinds of items for you to dig into this week. I'll bring you two stories from the Richmond County Council table, including one about a disagreement that's arisen between the county and the town of Port Hawkesbury about who should provide fire services to the community of Point Tupper. We'll also take you to Port Hawkesbury's first ever Pride March, and I'll have a special preview of a story that I'll be doing in a future show about Richmond County's graduates and a special celebration that was held for them over the weekend. But we begin with an update on coronavirus in Nova Scotia. I haven't gone as deeply into that issue over the last few weeks, partly because there hasn't been as much to tell in terms of active cases in Nova Scotia. Our province went 3 weeks in a row without a reported case, but then this week we got 3 new cases. All of that unfolded as a whole bunch of new social distancing and reopening rules were introduced by the province of Nova Scotia. And it's all getting underway as the Atlantic travel bubble kicks off on the first weekend of July. So here's a little breakdown about what's open, what's not, and what you should still be doing to keep yourself safe. Now, the first thing you need to know about what's acceptable in Nova Scotia these days is that the family bubble has burst. That means that you're no longer limited to 2 households in terms of who could get together with who. On June 16th, the province of Nova Scotia announced that up to 10 people can get together. Now, while it's not mandatory for them to be the same 10 people getting together without social distancing, Dr. Robert Strang, Nova Scotia's Chief Medical Officer, is recommending that a consistent group of 10 people get together in this particular group arrangement. However, beyond these basic family gatherings and get-togethers with friends, the number of people now accepted at public gatherings here in Nova Scotia has blown wide open. On June the 16th, the number expanded to 50. But only 12 days later, Premier Stephen McNeil and Dr. Strang increased that number to 250, properly socially distanced, of course, for outdoor gatherings. If the gathering is taking place indoors, it will allow 200 people, but they have to be properly socially distanced as well. So where can people gather together under these new expanded limits for Nova Scotia? Well, one organization that has gone ahead and started to do some reopening are churches here in the Strait Area and across the province. Reach Pentecostal Church on Church Street in Port Hawkesbury started having services in mid-June. They're now up to their 3rd service this particular weekend. And this is a big weekend for the Roman Catholic Diocese of Antigonish, which has instructed its churches to start reopening this weekend in July. St. Joseph's Roman Catholic Church here in Port Hawkesbury is one of these churches. However, they are making it clear to their parishioners that only 50 people can come to a service at one time, and people have to register for Mass beforehand. They can't just show up and hope to get in. However, the parish is also trying to schedule multiple Masses through the weekend. We advise you to check your local parish to try to find out what Mass time works best for you and how you can register for your own Catholic church. Also getting a boost from the province of Nova Scotia as spring shifted into summer were restaurant and bar owners. Those establishments are now allowed to be open at 100% capacity. However, that doesn't mean that they can cram all the tables and chairs back in. They still have to follow proper social distancing measures. As well, licensed establishments can serve liquor until midnight. Patrons have to leave the area before 1 o'clock in the morning. Also reopened just in time for the summer, playgrounds across Nova Scotia. The Port Hawkesbury Community Playground opened up just as soon as it got the green light from the province in mid-June, and just 2 days before the end of the month, the Community Playground also reopened its splash pad. Not only are splash pads reopening across Nova Scotia, so are local swimming pools. However, the province has pointed out that while the pools can reopen, they have to maintain social distancing in terms of how many people can swim in each lane at a given time. No word yet from the town of Port Hawkesbury on how that will work at the Strait Area Pool, located at the Sarek High School site, or exactly when the Strait Area Pool is going to reopen. But we'll find out soon enough. And in the meantime, I can confirm for you that private campgrounds are now open at 100% capacity. However, they are maintaining social distancing as well, based on what the province describes as their sector plans for reopening.
Unfortunately, one type of swimming won't happen this summer. Organizers of Swim the Canal, which has taken place at St. Peter's for the past 5 years, have finally confirmed that there is no way that they can safely hold the event and still hold up to the directives given out by Nova Scotia Public Health. Swim the Canal becomes the latest in a long line of casualties to the summer and fall tourism schedule in Richmond County and around Cape Breton Island. However, the first weekend of July saw the launch of a brand new Atlantic Canada travel bubble. Beginning on Friday, July the 3rd, anybody living in any Atlantic Canadian province can immediately travel to another Atlantic Canadian province, provided they have proof of residency to enter that province. Every adult is going to need to show either a driver's license, government identification card, health card, or a utility bill or bank statement with a valid Atlantic Canadian address to provincial officials at airports, ferries, or the land border when they arrive in the province. No self-declaration form will be required. If people can prove with these documents that their permanent home is in Atlantic Canada, they won't have to self-isolate for 14 days when they move from one Atlantic province to another. Premier Stephen McNeil reiterated on Thursday that Nova Scotia's borders are restricted and not closed. People from outside Atlantic Canada are welcome in Nova Scotia, but they must self-isolate for 14 days when they arrive. If they've already self-isolated in another Atlantic Canadian province, they can enter Nova Scotia without self-isolating again. And Nova Scotians who are planning to visit another Atlantic province should check before they leave to ensure they have the information documentation that's required in that specific province.
Welcome to Point Tupper. This was once a bustling residential community, fed by the ferries that took people and vehicles back and forth between Cape Breton Island and mainland Nova Scotia. With the arrival of the Cancel Causeway and the discontinuation of the ferry services, both in 1955, things changed dramatically in Point Tupper. There are still people living here, but much of the land is taken up by major heavy industries that have taken up root here in this community in Richmond County since the late 50s and on throughout the remainder of the 20th century and into the 21st. But Point Tupper doesn't have its own community volunteer fire department, and that's led this area to become a political football tossed back and forth between Richmond Municipal Council and the nearby town of Port Hawkesbury over who should provide fire services to residents and businesses in the area. And that battle came to a head just last week when Richmond Municipal Council, led by Warden Brian Marchand, terminated a contract that it had had with the town of Port Hawkesbury to have the town provide fire services from its volunteer fire department to the people here in Point Tupper. According to the statement released by Richmond officials on June 23rd, the county had entered into a one-year agreement with the town last July to provide fire services to the community of Point Tupper for a cost of just under $50,000 to the county. Now, just a couple of weeks ago, according to Richmond officials, the town proposed a new agreement to be put into effect this coming July that would have had a 25% increase in these costs, resulting in Richmond officials paying just under $75,000 for fire service protection for Point Tupper for the coming year. Further complicating matters for Richmond County was the fact that the municipality had hired an independent consultant to do a fire services review for the county, including Point Tupper. That review's final report landed at the Richmond County Chamber's table on May 15th. And according to the press release that came out on June the 23rd, that didn't give municipal officials enough time to digest the facts, figures, and suggestions that came out of that report. So they asked the town of Port Hawkesbury for an extension on its current one-year contract for that town's volunteer fire department to provide fire services to Point Tupper. In the end, according to the statement released in late June, Richmond officials felt that because of the low number of calls received from Point Tupper for fire services each year, an average of 3 according to the statement, as well as the fact that many volunteer fire departments around Richmond County were struggling to upkeep their equipment and their overall departments and could use the funds that were currently going to Port Hawkesbury, Richmond officials felt that it wasn't right to try to get another contract with Port Hawkesbury this coming summer. Port Hawkesbury officials wasted little time responding to Richmond County's statement of the termination of the fire services agreement for Point Tupper. 3 days after Richmond officials released their own statement, Port Hawkesbury Town Council joined forces with the town's volunteer fire department to issue a rebuke chastising Richmond County for changing the provider of fire services to Point Tupper 3 times in the last 3 years. As well, the chief of the Port Hawkesbury Volunteer Fire Department, Curtis Doucette, said, quote, "We stand by our record and we treat the area as our own. We are disappointed that Richmond County Council does not approve of our service towards Point Tupper."
In the statement from Port Hawkesbury, Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton uses words such as almost incomprehensible to describe Richmond County's decision to allow fire service protection for Point Tupper to be transferred to a department such as the Lewisdale and District Volunteer Fire Department, which had previously provided service before the latest stepping in by the town. She described the heavy industries in Point Tupper as the Strait region's most valuable asset, for which Richmond County receives more than $3.5 million in tax revenues. She added that the Port Hawkesbury Volunteer Fire Department will likely be called in to assist with any calls from Point Tupper, regardless of whether or not the Port Hawkesbury Fire Department is providing primary service, because of the mutual aid agreement struck between neighboring volunteer fire departments. In the town statement, Mayor Chisholm-Beaton also says that she reached out personally to Warden Marchand to seek an in-person meeting to discuss fire services, the town of Port Hawkesbury's stance, and the logic behind Richmond Council's decision. However, Mayor Chisholm-Beaton says that the request to meet in person was officially rejected via email by Warden Marchand on behalf of his council. Telile 24/7 reached out to Warden Marchand to give him the opportunity to respond to the town's claims. Despite our best efforts on both sides, we weren't able to make that interview come together by the time the show went to production. However, we do hope to have Warden Marchand on the air for you very soon to be able to address the situation himself. In Port Hawkesbury for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook.
It was a historic night in Port Hawkesbury. The town had risen a pride flag outside the Civic Centre before, and small pride events had happened in different parts of the town, but it had never had a pride rally and march like the one that occurred on June 29th just outside the Civic Centre. Several representatives from communities all across Nova Scotia came, and you're going to hear from a number of them in this next piece. Because this is such a historic event, we decided to let a lot of these speeches run in their entirety. So you're going to be hearing from rally organizer Taylor Linloff, Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton, Cape Breton-Canso MP Mike Kellaway, Wagamah Band Chief Rod Gugu, Wagamah Band Councillor Stephen Michael Gugu, and Port Hawkesbury Pride Advocate Bryson Syllaboy. And you'll also see the faces, the signs, and the looks of both concern and support on the hundreds that came from across the region and across the province to show their support for LGBTQI and the community on that Monday night in June. Let's take a look right now.
Who's ready? Let's do this! Happy Pride, Strait Area!
If the turnout on a rainy Monday evening in June was any indication, hundreds of people were ready for Port Hawkesbury to host its first official Pride March and for the first such event to take place in the Strait region. According to organizers, there were nearly 300 people either taking part in the actual march or providing support and honking horns from nearby parked cars. And they came from communities as diverse as Mabu, Sydney, St. Peter's, Isle Madame, Antigonish, and even Truro, where a long-time battle had waged between local residents and Mayor Bill Mills to have a pride flag flown at Truro Town Hall. Knowing that the town of Port Hawkesbury had been on board with her efforts over the 8 days it took to organize the rally, Port Hawkesbury activist Taylor Linloff was at times overcome with emotion while speaking to the crowd assembled just outside the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre. The event took place 51 years and 1 day after the Stonewall riots that had taken place in New York City and are considered the beginning of the modern Pride movement. That juxtaposition of events led to an emotional and fiery reaction from Lindelof as she addressed the crowd in her opening remarks.
Because of a riot against police brutality, transphobia, and homophobia, only 51 years later, I am able to stand proudly in front of you and feel safe saying that my name is Taylor Lindelof and I'm proudly queer. I organized this march on a leap of faith because I grew up as a queer youth in the autism spectrum in Port Hawkesbury. I know how isolating it can be to not be able to have the same milestones growing up and feel like the odd one out and shamed by your peers. But hey, I'm here, I'm loud, and I'm queer, and you're gonna have to get used to it. But I'm not doing this for me. So you can tell me whatever you want, you can tell me I'm going to hell, I don't care. All of us here today, we are doing this for all the parents and kids in the Strait Area who have had to move to Halifax and the cities to avoid social persecution and beatings. We're doing this for the trans teenagers who change their name and bravely walk into the correct bathroom stalls over at Sarek every single day. We're doing this for an adopted kid or two dads who get told that they're not a real family. We're doing this for the two-spirit individuals building community and identity despite the erasure and the racism and colonialism they still face. Heck, you know what? We're doing this for the 70-year-old grand-mère who lives down West Sarashad who's watching TV bingo trying to figure out how to tell her family she's a lesbian. We love her too. Yes, I'll say it, Mayor Brenda recently received disparaging comments for having the supposed audacity to fly the pride flag, but like Stonewall, the flag or even this march is not the end game. The end result has to be community involvement, support, acceptance, and liberation. The Compton cafeteria riot occurred only 3 years before Stonewall in response to trans patrons being refused service. And in comparison, NSCC held Pride Day here in 2018 to show their support for the student population, and Strait Area Queer Prom started last year as a means to have a safe space for LGBTQ youth. The solidarity of being here, as well as being part of the previous and future events, proudly yells that there is no place for homophobia or transphobia within the Strait Area or Eastern Nova Scotia. We need to keep moving forward and making progress because LGBTQ activism is grassroots work. It must keep the momentum to keep growing. So to those of you who, like me, fall under the umbrella of Rainbow, take all of this as a message. All of you right now, take a look around. Look who has come to support you, whether it be one-on-one support, online advocacy, or right here in 2-meter social distancing, all wearing masks. Take this as a message that whether you are out and proud or still closeted, though I hope the support today helps you find the courage to be authentically yourself from here on. You are seen, you are respected, you are loved. Be proud.
Strait Area Pride Rally attendees and organizers also felt the love from Port Hawkesbury Mayor Brenda Chisholm-Beaton. Only days earlier, she had received a complaint from a town resident about flying the pride flag just outside the Port Hawkesbury Civic Centre. She responded by going online with a picture of her pride pin from the Nova Scotia Community College. On this night, Mayor Chisholm-Beaton didn't hold back in her message of acceptance for the LGBTQI community.
It makes me so proud to be a Pride ally. I know this rally and march is one of many we will have in the future. Today is about hearing and learning from LGBTQ+ and Two-Spirit community members. Today is about showing our support as well in our Pride community. Today is about showing up. Today is about a promise to keep showing up each and every time to support Pride. As mayor, I am here to listen and learn. How can our town help with more opportunities to celebrate and support Pride initiatives? And I believe we can take this a step further. Beside me is Stephen Gugu, band counselor and Chief Rod Gugu of Weguma First Nations. Their presence here today leads me to believe that we can do more regionally, together, to help celebrate Pride initiatives. Stephen, Rod, and I believe we are stronger when we work together. I'm excited for our future when all of our communities all across Unama'ki and Cape Breton create welcoming spaces for LGBTQ+ and Two-Spirit citizens. But we have to do more than hope that this happens. We need to promise and plan to make it happen. What that promise and that plan looks like needs to be a collaboration between our LGBTQ+ and Two-Spirit communities and citizens, our leadership, and our communities. Today, thanks to Taylor, who I am so very proud of, we've taken this important first step.
Words of encouragement also came from Cape Breton Council MP Mike Kellaway.
Folks, the amount of time and effort that it takes to put something like this together, it takes usually months, and it's taken Taylor along with her colleagues and the mayor and other folks about a week. So please give it up for Taylor. It's an amazing thing she's done here. I'll be brief. First of all, thank you for coming. Thank you for inviting me. When I think of a march like this, this march, in this case, I think about a couple of things and what it symbolizes. It symbolizes acceptance, it symbolizes tolerance, it symbolizes that you are an ally for others, but really it symbolizes love. And we love everyone in Cape Breton Council, and tonight you're showing that no matter who you are, where you come from, that you are loved by the people of this riding, of this province, and this country. And that's a pretty special thing. Finally, I'll say, Taylor made a good point. It's important to be an ally and to come to events like this, but what's even more important is to continue to be an ally every day of your life, to support those that need your support, to accept those that undoubtedly need our support. And tonight is emblematic and it is symbolic of what we need to do as a country, is that we love everyone, we accept everyone. It's going to take some work, obviously, but you know what? It's worth it, it's needed, and it starts tonight. Thank you so much.
We are located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq.
A strong Indigenous presence also filled the Strait Area Pride Rally, with participants coming from regions as diverse as Budladek, Wagmacook, and Waikoba. Port Hawkesbury Pride activist Bryson Sillaboy gave an official land acknowledgement before speaking about his own experiences growing up on Shubenacadie First Nation.
I grew up in Shubenacadie, where the site of the residential school was. My people in Shubenacadie, most of us went there, and we suffered in that school. So it's great to see support here from our chiefs, especially for us Two-Spirit people, because we've been here for a long time. And we're still here. We are in a resurgence to bring back our culture, bring back who we were. And it's so great to see all these young children here and all of the Mi'kmaq that are here to support us during this. A word that we can all learn together is Gepi Delsi, which means I am proud.
The concept of being proud took on special meaning for two guests from Waikoba First Nation. Chief Rod Gugu and his son, band councillor Stephen Michael Gugu, both addressed the need to recognize the history of the Two-Spirit concept within Indigenous communities and how LGBTQ communities have often played a key role in the health and safety of First Nations people. But at the same time, Chief Gugu and his son, band councillor Gugu, were also there to show some support for family members who are part of the LGBTQ community as well.
I'm here today not as the chief proud chief of Wayland now. But I'm here today as a proud dad. Dad, to support my child on her journey, which I know is not going to be that easy at times. But I'm here to support my child. I'm a proud dad, and I'm a very proud chief of our community. A little history lesson. When your ancestors arrived here 500 years ago, you brought a Bible that told us, the Mi'kmaq, who have walked on these lands for 12,500 years. My people, we have walked on these lands 12,500 years based on archaeological findings. And your Bible told us that we are all in God's image, that we are all God's children. Isn't that what your Bible told us? Isn't that what your Bible said, that we are all God's children? We're all made in God's image? If that's the case, then why do we treat each other so differently? Why do we treat each other so differently? My first language is Mi'kmaq. My language tells me how we function, what we did things, what we had back then. Your language, English language, is a terrible language. You have all them hurtful, hateful words, slangs that you use on people of different lifestyles. I'm not going to utter them words, we all know what they are. In my culture, my language, we don't have them words. We don't have them terrible, hurtful words. They're not in my language. And you know why? I'll tell you why. People like you here today, who live a different lifestyle, were revered, were respected by our people because you guys were the people that administered medicine. You were the medicine people, the shamans, the gatherers that kept our people healthy and strong. You played a very important role in my culture to move on, to allow us to survive 12,500 years. And in closing, my intention was not to come here today to speak. I just was going to sneak in and just to show my support. But the mayor is very smart. She knows when she asks either me or Stephen that we both arrive, but it's 2-for-1 sale. And in case you didn't know, Stephen is my son. I'm very proud. I raised my children to be tolerant, to speak up and speak out against social injustices. That's how I raised my children.
I stand before you a proud Mi'kmaq. I stand before you honored and humbled to be here. I also stand here before you a proud supporter of our two-spirited brothers and sisters. The time of resentment, fear, bullying, and the unknown is the past. The time for pride, acceptance, education, and support is now. On behalf of Wagamah Chief and Council, we hope that you all come to our parade and march when we have ours in our community of Wagamah First Nation. And in my closing note, I just want to say, I'll always stand behind my sister. I'll always stand behind my cousin. I'll always stand behind my friends. And most importantly, I'll always stand behind all of you today.
Whether standing together or marching together through the streets of Port Hawkesbury, one thing is clear: The turnout for the first ever Strait Area Pride March exceeded expectations of both organizers, participants, and town officials alike, and planning is already underway for the second annual Strait Area Pride Rally coming next year in June to celebrate Pride Month 2021. In Port Hawkesbury for Telile 24/7, I'm Adam Cook.
Now, you might remember that earlier in the show, we talked a bit about the community of Point Tupper and how that has implications for Richmond County, which Point Tupper is a part of, and the nearby town of Port Hawkesbury. Well, there's another bit of common ground for Richmond County and Port Hawkesbury this year. Their residents aren't seeing their tax rates going up. Both the county and the town passed their municipal budgets for the year 2020-2021 in June. In Port Hawkesbury, the residential tax rate is staying at $1.80 per $100 of assessment, while the commercial tax rate is holding steady at $4.38 per $100 of assessment. This came about despite Port Hawkesbury having to deal with a shortfall of $480,000, which it was able to deal with by dipping into the town's municipal reserves. What's the situation like in Richmond County? Well, here's a special report to tell you how they managed to keep their tax rates the same as well.
In Richmond County, the tax rates remain the same on the commercial and residential side. Residential taxes still sit at 80 cents per $100 of assessment, while the commercial rate remains at $2.10. The only vote against the budget came from District 5 Councillor Jason McLean. McLean said he couldn't support the 2020-2021 county budget because it left no room for community groups that have struggled to access funding after the revision of Richmond County's community grants policy nearly a year ago. McLean also took issue with changes to area water and sewer rates in the various communities that make up Richmond County. While other councillors expressed similar concerns about the area rates, in the end, McLean was the only one to oppose the budget, which also included cuts to the funds that Richmond County gives to Strait Area Transit and the Strait Area Pool. Richmond County's Chief Financial Officer, Jason Martell, pointed out that these cuts were necessary to offset 2 years' worth of declining commercial tax revenue. The biggest hit came from ExxonMobil's dismantling of its fractionation plant in Point Tupper, which cost the county nearly $380,000 in lost revenues. Join us next week on Telile 24/7 when we bring you the story of Richmond County's unique grad procession. We'll tell you how parents, school officials, sponsors, and others got together to give a special send-off to Richmond County graduates in the time of COVID-19. That's all next week on Telile 24/7.
I'm closing this week's edition of Telile 24/7 on a sad note. As a media person, a reporter, a broadcaster, and someone who's just interested in local municipal affairs, I've worked with a lot of people whose faces you don't always see out in the public eye. They serve many different posts. They're not elected. They're not CAOs. They're the folks who work behind the scenes to make sure that minutes are recorded, that the general operations of a municipality are run smoothly, and most importantly, that there's a connector between those who are elected to serve the public and the public that they're elected to serve. Few did that role better than Donna MacDonald. On Wednesday, Canada Day, the town of Port Hawkesbury reported on its official Facebook page that Donna had passed away at the age of 58. I still have emails sent only days earlier in my own personal email file from Donna about town council meetings, about press releases that the town had put out, and about various issues that she wanted me to know about. That's the way Donna was. She was efficient, she was hardworking, she made sure that the people, the general public, and reporters like me got to know what was going on with the town. She kept meticulous minutes, some of the best organized that I've ever seen in covering any municipality since the early 90s. But Donna MacDonald wasn't simply about making sure the job got done, although she always did. She greeted anybody who came to the town office, for whatever purpose, with a big smile, a welcoming attitude, and a sense that they were valued no matter why they were coming or who they happened to be. And I can guarantee you, she was a Telile viewer, and she did see me on these broadcasts, and always made sure to say so when she did. There are not many like Donna MacDonald. Mayor Brenda Chisholm Beaton reflected on her own Facebook page just yesterday that not only did MacDonald do her job so very well, but she also was kind to those who had first been elected to town council in Port Hawkesbury. Mayor Chisholm Beaton recalled her early days as a town councillor in 2012 and how Donna MacDonald took her under her wing and made sure that she would be able to get her feet wet and get settled in with the way that Port Hawkesbury was run. We send our condolences from Telile to Donna MacDonald's family, friends, and all those who knew her. And we hope that her example will inspire a new generation of leaders to not only get the job done efficiently and correctly, but to do so with a very human touch. That wraps up this week's edition of Telile 24/7. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for everybody who helped me out with this week's episode. If you have any story ideas or interview suggestions for the show, you can always contact me. That number is 902-625-8863, and you can email adamjrcook@gmail.com. Don't forget to follow Telile Community Television on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And on our YouTube channel, you can find every single episode of Telile 24/7, including this one. And you'll also see individual stories and interviews from our various shows. We've got quite a few of them on the channel now. And you will notice that a lot of my Telile friends have been putting together some brand new content as we gear up for a busy summer. So be sure to check out those interviews and music performances and everything else that you might want to see on Telile Community Television's Facebook page. For now, I'm Adam Cook. Thank you once again for tuning in. We look forward to seeing you very soon with another new edition of Telile 24/7.